There are managers. And then there is Alex Ferguson. Most people remember the red face, the pointed finger, the famous hairdryer, that voice cutting through a dressing room like thunder on a quiet night. But here's what most people never saw. Behind all that fire was a man who understood human beings better than almost anyone in football. He didn't just read tactics. He read souls. He knew what made a player tick, what broke them, what lifted them. And that made his respect rare, almost impossible to earn. Ferguson managed Manchester United for 26 years. 26 years. He saw hundreds of players walk through those doors at Old Trafford. Young boys with big dreams. World superstars with bigger egos. Legends who had already conquered everything. But only a handful ever made him stop and truly look up. See, Ferguson had a simple rule. Talent was never enough. Talent was just the beginning. What he wanted, what he needed, was something deeper. Something you couldn't teach in training. Something no amount of money could buy. He called it character. And at 84 years old, after surviving a brain hemorrhage that nearly took him from this world entirely, he sat down, reflected, and named the 7. Not the most talented, not the most decorated, not the biggest names. The 7 he truly respected. When the list came out, some names felt obvious. Others left people completely speechless, because a few of them were never even his own players. That's when it got interesting. That's when you realize this wasn't about football at all. Before we talk about the names, you need to understand something. Ferguson didn't hand out respect like a participation trophy. He wasn't that kind of man. In fact, some of the greatest players in football history, men with Ballon d'Or awards and Champions League medals, left Old Trafford feeling like they never truly cracked him. That says everything. He once told a close friend, "I can forgive a mistake. I cannot forgive a lack of effort." Simple words. But inside that dressing room, those words were law. Players who coasted? Gone. Players who prioritized money over the badge? Gone. Players who let fame change them before they'd even earned the right to be famous? Gone faster than anyone could blink. And the players who stayed, who thrived, who grew into legends under his watch, they all shared something invisible. Something you could only feel when you watched them play. Or watch them train on a freezing Tuesday morning with nobody in the stadium. With no cameras. No crowd. No applause. They gave everything anyway. That was Ferguson's standard. Not perfection. Not genius. Consistency when nobody was watching. And if you want to understand why his list of 7 shocks people, you have to understand this first. Because some of the names missing from that list are just as loud as the names on it. Players who dazzled millions, but never fully had Ferguson's heart. Players who had everything, except the thing he valued most. So when he finally revealed who made the cut, the football world went very, very quiet. When the list started circulating, social media exploded. Because nobody expected this. The first name Ferguson mentioned was Eric Cantona. And honestly, nobody argued with that. Cantona was more than a footballer. He was a statement. A man who walked into Old Trafford when the club was still searching for its identity and single-handedly changed the culture forever. Ferguson didn't just respect Cantona's talent. He respected his courage. The way he carried himself. Like he belonged everywhere he went. Like doubt was a language he simply never learned. But then came the second name, Roy Keane. Now here's where it gets complicated. Because Ferguson and Keane didn't exactly end on warm terms. Their falling out was public, painful, almost bitter. Yet Ferguson named him anyway. And that told you more about Ferguson than anything else ever could. He said Keane was the greatest midfielder he ever managed. Not the most gifted, the greatest. Because Keane dragged people to his level. He made average players feel like champions simply by standing next to them. That kind of leadership, Ferguson never forgot it. Then came a name that genuinely stunned people. Ronaldo? Yes. But not the one you're thinking. Not Cristiano. Ronaldo Nazario. The Brazilian. A player Ferguson never even managed. The room went silent when that came out. Because it proved something beautiful about this old man at 84. His respect had no borders. No club loyalty. No bias. It was simply pure. And the next names? They got even more unexpected. Some players chase the spotlight. And some players just work. They arrive early. They leave late. They don't complain when the manager drops them. They don't sulk when the crowd chants someone else's name. They just put their head down and they grind. Ferguson loved those players most of all. And the next names on his list proved exactly that. Paul Scholes. Ferguson once said something about Scholes that stopped everyone cold. He said the greatest players in the world, Xavi, Zidane, Giggs, they all admitted Scholes was better than them. A quiet boy from Salford who never sought attention, never chased headlines, never needed the validation. He just played football like it was breathing, natural, effortless, inevitable. Ferguson respected Scholes because he represented everything football was supposed to be about. Not fame, not money, just pure love for the game. Then came Dennis Irwin. Now, if you're younger, you might not know that name immediately. And that's exactly the point. Irwin was never the most celebrated, never the one on magazine covers. But Ferguson called him the most consistent player he ever managed. Out of everyone, out of all the superstars and legends, a quiet fullback from Cork, Ireland. Perfect in almost every single game he played. Year after year after year. Ferguson said, "If I could build a player from scratch, Dennis Irwin would be the foundation." That line broke a lot of hearts. In the most beautiful way. Because these were the players history sometimes forgets. But Ferguson never did. And the final three names? One would inspire you. One would surprise you. And one would absolutely break you. Some players chase the spotlight. And some players just work. They arrive early. They leave late. They don't complain when the manager drops them. They don't sulk when the crowd chants someone else's name. They just put their head down and they grind. Ferguson loved those players most of all. And the next names on his list proved exactly that. Paul Scholes. Ferguson once said something about Scholes that stopped everyone cold. He said the greatest players in the world, Xavi, Zidane, Giggs, they all admitted Scholes was better than them. A quiet boy from Salford who never sought attention, never chased headlines, never needed the validation. He just played football like it was breathing, natural, effortless, inevitable. Ferguson respected Scholes because he represented everything football was supposed to be about. Not fame, not money, just pure love for the game. Then came Dennis Irwin. Now, if you're younger, you might not know that name immediately. And that's exactly the point. Irwin was never the most celebrated, never the one on magazine covers. But Ferguson called him the most consistent player he ever managed. Out of everyone, out of all the superstars and legends, a quiet fullback from Cork, Ireland. Perfect in almost every single game he played. Year after year after year. Ferguson said, "If I could build a player from scratch, Dennis Irwin would be the foundation." That line broke a lot of hearts. In the most beautiful way. Because these were the players history sometimes forgets. But Ferguson never did. And the final three names? One would inspire you. One would surprise you. And one would absolutely break you. Ferguson never forgot kindness. But he never forgot betrayal either. And this chapter is about both. Because the next name on his list came with a story. A complicated, painful, deeply human story that most fans only know half of. Ryan Giggs. 26 years. That's how long Giggs played under Ferguson. From a skinny teenager sneaking past fullbacks on the wing, to a gray-haired veteran lifting trophies in front of 75,000 people. Ferguson didn't just respect Giggs. He loved him. He once said Giggs was the closest thing to a son this sport ever gave him. The one constant in a career full of changes. When players came and went, when trophies were won and seasons were lost, Giggs was always there. Always loyal. Always professional. Always united. But here's what made Ferguson's respect for Giggs run even deeper. Giggs could have left. Multiple times. Real Madrid called. Barcelona whispered. The money was incomprehensible. He stayed anyway. In a world where loyalty in football is almost extinct, Giggs chose the badge over the bank account. Every single time. And Ferguson never forgot that. Then came a name nobody saw coming. Steve Bruce. Not a glamorous name. Not a Ballon d'Or winner. Just a tough, honest center-back who gave Ferguson everything he had. Every tackle, every header, every drop of blood on every pitch. Ferguson said Bruce represented the heartbeat of his early great teams. The foundation nobody talks about, but everybody needed. Without Bruce, there may have been no dynasty at all. But the final two names. One was a fierce rival. A man who sat in the opposite dugout and pushed Ferguson to his absolute limit. And one was a player whose story ended far too soon.
Far too soon.
There are rivals. And then there are people who make you better simply by existing. Ferguson's sixth name was not a Manchester United player. It was Arsène Wenger. Now, before you say anything, hear this out. Because Ferguson and Wenger had one of the most intense rivalries football has ever seen. They argued on touchlines. They clashed in press conferences. There were moments where the tension between them felt like it could shatter glass. But at 84, sitting quietly with all that fire finally cooled, Ferguson admitted something remarkable. He said Wenger made him a better manager. That the rivalry pushed him to places he never would have reached alone. That without Arsenal breathing down United's neck through those incredible late 90s and early 2000s battles, he might have grown comfortable. And comfort, Ferguson always believed, was the beginning of the end. Respecting Wenger wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. The kind of wisdom that only comes when a man has lived long enough to see the full picture. The crowd online went silent when that name dropped. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared people for the seventh name. Because the final name wasn't a superstar, wasn't a rival, wasn't even someone most casual fans would recognize immediately. It was a young player, a boy really. Someone who pulled on a Manchester United shirt with pure joy in his eyes and never got the chance to show the world what he could truly become. His name was Colin Webster, a forgotten soul from the Busby Babes era, a survivor of Munich. Ferguson choked when he said the name. His voice dropped. His eyes went somewhere distant. Because some respects aren't about football at all. They're about remembering the ones the world forgot. There's a moment that happens to every great man. When the noise finally stops. When the trophies collect dust. When the dressing room goes quiet forever. And all that's left is the truth of who you really were. For Alex Ferguson, that moment came on May 5th, 2018. A brain hemorrhage.
Sudden.
Savage. Without warning. The man who had controlled everything suddenly controlled nothing. And when he came back, when he slowly, painfully fought his way back to the world, something had changed inside him. Not his passion, not his love for football, but his perspective. He stopped seeing the game in trophies and titles. He started seeing it in people, in moments, in the quiet sacrifices nobody ever applauded, in the loyalty nobody ever properly rewarded. That's why this list matters so much. Because it wasn't written by a manager counting medals. It was reflected upon by an 84-year-old man counting the people who genuinely moved him. Cantona gave him belief. Keane gave him fire. Ronaldo Nazario gave him pure wonder. Scholes gave him beauty. Irwin gave him reliability. Giggs gave him loyalty. Bruce gave him heart. And that young boy from Munich gave him perspective. Together those 7 names tell you everything about what Ferguson truly valued beneath all that fury and ambition. He didn't respect perfection. He respected humanity, the will to push through, the choice to stay when leaving was easier, the courage to be ordinary, extraordinarily well. And maybe that's the lesson for all of us. Fame fades. Records get broken. Trophies get forgotten in glass cabinets. But the way you made people feel? That stays forever. Sir Alex Ferguson, 84 years old, still the greatest student of human nature football ever produced. And somewhere in a quiet room,